Hello, this is Relax, and today I'm going to be bringing you an old favorite, blue-black fairies in Modern. So, over the last, I want to say, year? It's almost a year and a half now that Bitter Blossom's been on ban. People have, you know, brought fairies back around to mixed success. At Pro Tour Valencia was definitely not the deck to play, but after that, it finished 13th at X2 on Breakers at the massive Grand Prix Richmond in the hands of, I believe it was Alex Sittner that time. And it's had a couple other near misses on top eight, same kind of X2 positions. I think at Pittsburgh last winter again. Um, and recently it got another piece back in Central Vision. So now you can play the true Faeries deck that I never really had a chance to play. And by never had a chance, I mean I chose to play Revelark instead, like a big dum-dum. Um, yeah, but after that point, I made the decision to play Fairies, and it was probably one of my favorite decks ever. And just looking around, there's been a little uptick in 5-0s in leagues with the deck, and importantly, recently on the one of the Magic Reddits, a redditor by the name of Despiral222 posted about their list, pretty in depth in terms of sideboarding and everything. And I kind of read it over, and a lot of it just kind of rang true with all the things that I learned about Fairies in the years I played it. Um, just a lot of the decisions made, a lot of the like numbers, and the kind of style of what's actually going on in every match just made a lot of sense to me. So picked up their list. I'm going to give it a try tonight. Kind of go through. One of the big draws of Fairies is that you get to play a lot of value lands. You are two-color deck in a three-color format, so you get to play Tar Pits and Mutavaults, and there's even room for a Ghost Quarter. Your mana constraints aren't actually that absurd. Though Creeping Tar Pit does rein in a little bit of the old-school all-four drops Fairies, the format is pushing away from that to begin with. You need to be a little faster than all Mistbind clicks and Cryptic commands. So Tar Pit kind of slots in nicely to give you a action card that is payoff for having a little more mana, but at the same time doesn't require you to play a million 4-drops. The rest of the mana, Dark Slick Shores, great here. Secluded Glen, great here. Polluted Delta, not super important because you're only a two-color deck. As you'll see, you're pretty light on basics, which means you're a little soft to Blood Moon. But that card's been seeing a big downtick recently. I think that the loss of Amulet as a deck to prey on with it was a big deal. And I think that Tron just doesn't lose to it enough, and people kind of know that now. Crumble to Dust is just a better card that's easier to access. And just one River Tears. I'm not a huge fan of this card. I understand what it does in terms of casting Inquisition on turn 1 and then blue spells whenever. But if you're cutting on Cryptic Command, this card is a little unreliable in terms of leaving up removal. So we've got a few stacks of spells here. We've got the blue nonsense stack. We've got some Ancestral Vision. Not a ton because you do have other 1-drops you want to cast. And there's some overlap and drawing multiples and things like that. Also, Fairies isn't the perfect Ancestral Vision deck. You do have some time situational cards that pop up when you draw 3. But in general, it's pretty good with this card. A Snapcaster Mage, just a kind of way to milk a little extra value out of your cards. Not a ton of these. Again, this is the same 4-drop clunky trap that this deck can fall into sometimes, especially because it plays so many creatures. Not quite enough spells to support a ton of these. Cryptic Command cut down to 2. Again, just clunk factor. Mana Leak over Remand. You actually want to put your opponent's cards in the graveyard. The combo of Remand and Thoughtseize and Inquisition in the same deck's not really where you want to be. You don't want to be like, oh, I'm going to pluck a card out of your hand and then tempo you. Tempo discard is never really the deal. Tempo discard, what tempo discard is where you discard their play and then you make a play and then they miss their turn. And then because your play is Bitter Blossom, you just take over the game. Not like remanding their spell after. It doesn't really work. The list is a little light on Spell Snare, but I'm fine here to start. Just a bit of a removal split to cover your bases. You don't want a ton of Murderous Cuts without a lot of fetch lands, but one is fine. Thoughtseize, Inquisition, some other removal spells. Disfigure being kind of this really nice, efficient spell that doesn't cost you life in your already kind of life loss heavy deck. Then we've got the Faerie Stack. So a lot of Medallion clicks, threat that can kill on its own. Decent number of Mistbind clicks. This is kind of the payoff for playing this deck, is that you get to time walk the mid-range decks. Conveniently doesn't die to Abrupt Decay if you can set up multiple Faeries to not lose to Abrupt Decay in your champion choice. A bunch of spell stutters. This is a card I've cut down in the past. Not be surprised. It does get boarded out in a lot of matchups. Would not be surprised if there's a future where 3 is right, though I'm not sure. It's very possible that that's the kind of thing where if Faeries is good, you want to be playing 4 Spell Stutter Sprite, and if you don't want to be playing 4 Spell Stutter Sprite, Faeries isn't good because it's one of your payoff cards. Then Bitter Blossom. This card's wonderful and gives you a lot of free wins. I don't know what else to say about it. So moving to the sideboard, we've got these big sweeping effects and then these kind of chip shoddy fix up your removal based threats. You'll notice there's not a ton of alternate big threats like Batterskull. That's not how this deck is trying to win mid-range matchups. You're trying to rely on the strength of your inherent cards like Bitter Blossom, which, by the way, I think that one of the big draws of this deck currently is that it feels like it should be really good against the Nahiri decks. They're just like a control deck that you fight over Ancestral Vision better because Spell Stutter Sprite counters it, and then they have a 4-drop sorcery as their win condition, and you have Faeries. And that feels like the kind of deck that Faeries has just historically always preyed on. So I would not be surprised that this is a good counter to those decks. So we've got Hurkyl's Recall as our affinity hate. We are a tempo-ish deck, and Faeries definitely can utilize the time that Hurkyl's Recall buys very well, as opposed to, I mean, it's also blue-black, so there's not a lot of real hate you can play. You can't really tap 5 for a Curse of Deathhold, and this is not a Knight of Souls Betrayal deck. Some relics, really nice that you get to be a deck that gets to play this card. I've harped on about this a lot over years of playing Modern, but Relic of Progenitus is just a really, really powerful card in the format, and it just like, even fair decks it just beats randomly because they're on like Gurmag Anglers or Traverse the Ulvenwald or whatever, and being able to access it out of your own fair deck because you're not like a Tarmogoyf deck is a really big plus. In the past, the white-black tokens deck has done that to great success. Some Kalitas. This card is just a great. It's just a great Magic card. Yeah, there's just not a lot to say about it besides that. It straight up KOs Abzan Company. Doesn't die to Abrupt Decay. Lets you play a kind of trump in a lot of matchups that otherwise was not nearly as powerful before. Was a little clunkier because of Batterskull, or a little more vulnerable to artifact removal. Damnation to mop everything up. Some engineered explosives do the same. The player who built this list is very high on boarding this card in a lot of slots. I'm going to follow their advice and try it out and see how it goes. It feels like the kind of thing where because you're doing it, you should be, like if you have it in hand, you should be setting up for it. So we'll see. Some counter spells to board in against the matchups where you want less removal. Another Ghost Quarter to disrupt Tron and various other decks. You can take out creature lands out of Affinity, and in fact, you can take out Ghost Quarter's 4th color for Bring to Light sometimes. Then, a couple other, Thoughtseize again. This kind of goes with the Dispel and Negate package of disrupting combo, and then another Disfigure to help you fight the aggressive decks. I will note that the Wild Nacatl matchup has always been horrific, and if I'm able to beat it tonight, that would kind of be the dream come true. But besides that, I don't really know what I'm getting myself into just yet. So I'm really excited to find out because I think the worst case scenario is that I get to play a few matches with some cards that I really enjoy, and the best case scenario is the deck is good, and I guess I'm then really sad that I'm not going to Grand Prix Charlotte to play it. That's a pretty sad best case scenario. Let's play some games and forget about it.